This is NewsDesk. I'm your host, Jason Miller, here with Dr. David Summers. Thanks for tuning in. Dr. Summers is the director of the Summers Institute of Foreign Affairs. David, let's start right away with what's going on in Iran, in the Persian Gulf there. This from Reuters. Iran threatened on Tuesday to take action if the U.S. Navy moves an aircraft carrier back into the Gulf. Iran's most aggressive statement yet after weeks of saber rattling as the U.S. and EU financial sanctions take a toll on its economy. The U.S. aircraft carrier group,
three of them,
moved out of the Persian Gulf to make way for Iran's 10 days of military exercises. So now that the U.S. is out of that area, Iran's threatening if they come back to where they were, back in the Persian Gulf, the U.S. carrier, that they'll do whatever.
A hollow threat, I'm sure. That's a tremendous amount of firepower that the U.S. has right there. I don't think that the Tehran regime is ready to be as adventurous in engaging American strength in that area. I doubt very much. They can encourage their proxies like Hezbollah and Hamas to engage in provocative and bellicose actions. They themselves, against the United States, I think it's very much of a hollow threat, and it shows how much the sanctions are biting.
Well, it's not only that our 2 or 3 carrier groupings are powerful that are in that region, but we have firepower all over the place. That Diego Garcia Island where the B-52s are,
we do.
It's not far away.
We do, but 3 aircraft carriers are tremendous, powerful instruments sitting right there. And as you say, we have even more firepower not far away.
We have bases in Turkey.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. But those bases in Turkey, as was shown in the Iraq War, are only usable with the approval of the Turkish government, whereby those aircraft carriers, they could just be put to work immediately.
That's a good point. But we have bases all around Iran.
We do, most
Everywhere.
assuredly.
Well, anyway, supposedly the reason Iran is being bellicose is because these sanctions, which went into effect New Year's Day, actually, and you know the Iranian currency has dropped 40% since then.
Yes, it was pointed out that one good thing that Iran gets out of this is with their threats, jacks up the price of oil. And that's the only thing that Iran has of any real worth that brings money into the coffers of the Islamist regime in Iran is oil. Other than that, there's nothing that they can.
Well, let me give some more details on this Reuters article. Sanctions signed into law by President Obama on New Year's Eve would cut financial institutions that work with Iran's central bank off from the U.S. financial system, blocking the main path for Iran to receive payments for its crude. For banks to be cut off from the U.S. market.
That's the most important thing. The payment for the oil that Iran produces has to go through the central bank.
Right.
And that's something that the American administration, the Obama administration, has resisted doing because they know how very effective it is and how that might spur the Tehran regime to military action. Again, however, I doubt it very much that they're going to tangle with 3 American aircraft carriers.
All right, but let's continue on this vein about the sanctions, because you know it looks like this might be the very first time these sanctions actually have some bite to them.
Right.
Now, going on further, it says the EU is expected to impose new sanctions by the end of the month, possibly including a ban on oil imports and a freeze of central bank assets. And now, you know, the countries that tend to sort of support Iran, even they are getting in on it, like for a different reason, though. It says even Iran's top trading partner, China, which has refused to back new global sanctions, is demanding discounts to buy Iranian oil as Tehran's options narrow.
Clever Chinese.
Since the Iranians can't
Chinese.
sell it anyway.
Yes, the Chinese say, you give us a discount
Right,
now.
right.
I think that's priceless.
Let's see, it says, such threats can cause market confidence in the global supply to wobble and can push up oil prices and shipping insurance prices. Well, that's Iran's play, how they can counter this. Just by threatening to fire on these oil tankers,
Right.
the oil tankers aren't going to move because they can't get, well, they have no insurance. If a ship gets hit, that's it.
Right.
And that would raise the price of oil. All right. Now, continuing on with Iran, this is from BBC. Iran says it has successfully test-fired 2 more missiles on the final day of naval exercises in the Gulf. They don't need ships. Just fire their surface-to-surface missiles from shore-to-ship missiles.
That's right.
From their territory. Let's see, it says they fired a ground-to-ship cruise missile and a short-range anti-ship missile. A medium-range surface-to-air missile was launched on Sunday. Now, Iran has conducted 10 days of exercises near the Strait of Hormuz, through which 20% of the world's oil passes. Vice President Rahimi on Tuesday threatened to shut the strait, which links the Gulf and the oil-producing states.
Yes.
So you think it's just talk?
I do. And in fact, it's counterproductive for the Iranian regime because it shows, at least to many of our European friends and others, how reckless this regime is. Even to threaten to close the Gulf is a reckless and irresponsible action. It will, I think, draw many more nations to the side of the United States and our allies.
But you know what? There's been cases like this before. Didn't Nasser of Egypt, way back in the 60s or so, or 50s, threaten to close the Suez Canal? And he did. He sunk ships in the canal.
He did. He threatened to close. Well, his major threat was to Israel and to cut off, to blockade Eilat.
No. This was before that.
Oh, before that.
1956.
Oh, in 56. Oh, I see, in 56.
When he sank ships in the Suez Canal itself, so the canal was closed to everybody. All
yes, he did. But only after he was attacked. Only after he was attacked by France,
Britain,
and then Israel, right? Only then. He didn't do that before. And I think that's the key matter. If you believe that the Iranian regime is at least minimally rational, they're not going to get into a military engagement with the United States.
Well, all right. So let's move on now. For the last number of weeks, Syria's been in the news. Give us an update on Syria. What's going on?
Well, they're continuing to do the same thing. They're continuing to kill their own demonstrating citizens in large numbers. Yes, there's been an Arab League observation team in Syria, but it seems that the government pays little attention. They continue to kill, right? When the demonstrators are out, whether the observers are around or not, they go about mowing down their citizens. And it is noteworthy that the head of this observation team was also the head of a murderous campaign in Darfur for the Sudan government. It's a totally illegitimate operation, as many demonstrators say, that this observation team is really doing nothing.
Huh. Well,
Nothing
there's a few more details I've come across. Number one, Assad is building a tremendous fortification in the northwest of the country for him to go to see out a civil war if it goes into that. Very big, and The other thing is they're taking casualties. The Assad government is taking, they claim 1,200 or 1,500 casualties, or deaths, sorry, from the Free Syria force. Or
You mean by the Assad government? You mean the troops?
right, pro-Assad military.
Whether they're pro or not, but at least they're in the government's military.
Right, exactly. But they're being fired on by snipers, which are deserters,
right,
that have joined the other side.
Exactly.
So it is looking like it's going that civil war direction.
Yes.
So let's see what we have here now in this country. We've got, now we're taping this show on Tuesday, January 3rd, which is Election Day in Iowa for the Republican caucus. You'll be viewing the show the next day, Wednesday or on Friday, so you will know who wins, but we don't at this point. So what we have to go on is this from the Des Moines Register. Their latest poll shows a three-way tie at this point. Mitt Romney, Ron Paul, and Rick Santorum. We have Romney at 24%, Paul at 22%, and Santorum at 15%. As far as the lower tier, Gingrich at 12, Perry at 11, and Bachmann at 7. You know, this poll asked voters a few other questions. They asked, who would they say is the most knowledgeable? And your guess would be?
Romney.
No, Gingrich.
No. Oh, Gingrich. Oh, the most knowledgeable, yes.
Gingrich at 41%. The most concerned about reducing government debt.
That's probably Mr. Paul.
That's right. Paul at 42%. Next, least ego-driven.
Ego-driven, that's an interesting one. Gee, Mr. Santorum.
No, Paul at 28%.
Oh, Paul, really?
The best able to bring about real change.
Oh, goodness me. Gingrich?
Mr. Paul again at 21%.
Mr. Paul.
That's right.
Well, but Mr. Paul's a loser.
Well, all right, but even so.
Yes.
For these questions.
For these questions, I think it's very interesting.
The most electable in the general election.
Mr. Romney.
Mr. Romney at 48%. And last, the most dedicated to limiting the influence of government.
Oh, again, Mr. Paul.
That's right.
Yes. Well, you know, it's very interesting we're talking about Mr. Paul because just before we were discussing various elements of the foreign affairs situation. And the reason I think that Mr. Paul is, in the end, a loser is because his views on foreign affairs and the involvement of the United States in the world, those views are so radical that they'll be rejected by the great majority of Americans. A lot of people do like what Ron Paul says about limiting government and just cutting down to size the whole Washington establishment. They really do like it. But when it comes to his views on foreign affairs, they just think that he's off the wall.
Well, you know, with that in mind, that does seem to be the case. Maybe Ron Paul would have done himself a favor if he would have worded it a little bit differently, such as we need to cut back on our foreign involvement. We need to close some bases. We're too spread out, spend too much money on these things.
Sure, but